Hello everyone and welcome back to the video. Today I'm going to be finally talking about the new water rework that has been introduced to Age of Empires 2 for about a couple weeks now, but it's not actually introduced into the main game. It's introduced into a side patch and it's being tested through a big $25,000 tournament, Thalassocracy 2, showcasing the best players in the world playing with this new water rework, new water balance, which introduces a new ship, bunch of new features, and just new game mechanics that have never been in the game before. So it's a pretty big change, and I felt like a video was definitely needed. People have been asking me about my opinion about this all week, whether I liked it, hated it, something in between, and so it's a hot topic and it's worth addressing. I just want to be transparent though. I wanted to take my time before rushing into a video because I was actually in China for a tournament when the news was dropped, and then I had some vacations in China for a few days after, so I kind of just missed the rush to like see the new content, try it out. So it was a bit late to the party. However, since then I've taken my time. I actually reached top 16 in this tournament as I'm recording this video, so currently in top 16, and I figured let's rush and make a video because my next round is potentially doubt, so better to make the video before I lose to doubt than after. So just trying to cover all my bases here. But here we are, top 16 of this tournament. I've played a few rounds and I've got a pretty good feel of this water rework, so it's a perfect time to go ahead and give you guys a breakdown on my thoughts on the rework and kind of what I feel about it and how I think the future should look like for water in AoE 2. Now, before I go into any thoughts on the matter, I first want to give a quick recap of what the rework actually is for those who are not caught up, but I'll just quickly kind of catch you guys up to speed. So first of all, they added a new unit, which is the Hulk. It's a water unit that does melee damage and is upgraded through melee upgrades in the blacksmith, the first of its kind. And it's kind of like a fire ship where it has very little range. Actually, the Hulk has one range compared to the fire ship's 2.5, so it's even more melee range than the fire ship. Next, they added a warship upgrade for Imperial Age, so kind of like how before you had the war galley upgrade that upgraded the trio of water units. Now you have the same thing in Castle Age, but then you also have an Imperial Age version. And they also changed what the trio is that is affected. So the trio before was Galley, Fires, Demo. Now it's Galley, Fires, and Hulk. That's the new trio. And the demos actually get their own upgrade, both in Castle Age and Imperial Age. So now you have the trio upgrade and you have the demo upgrade. They also took all other ship upgrades, so careening, dry dock, shipwright, and they threw them in the university. And they also added a bunch of different upgrades as well that we're going to talk about throughout the video. But basically upgrades that affect the demolition ships, upgrades that affect the fire ships, so on and so forth. They also reworked a lot of the numbers on the ships. They heavily reduced all the hidden bonus damage that all the ships dealt to each other, kind of just making it a little bit easier to read what ship is countering what and how much damage is being dealt, which I think is very good. And then they also gave fishing ships the ability to garrison docks. So before only the Gurjara dock can garrison fishing ships, now everybody can garrison fishing ships. It's 5 per dock, and you actually shoot some arrows from the dock when you do have the fishing ships garrisoned. Although to be fair, the arrows are quite weak and it's not like a tower or it's not anything you can really rely on defensively. It's kind of just like a decent arrows that can push some damage out, but nothing too crazy. Even though these arrows aren't the strongest, it's still nice to have something to protect your fishing boat. And speaking of protection, it's time to thank the sponsor of today's video, Proton Pass. Proton Pass is a secure password manager built to protect your accounts and put you in control. It keeps all of your passwords and sensitive information stored and organized in one secure app, ending resets and lockouts. You can generate strong passwords, autofill logins, store two-factor authentication codes, and even use email aliases to protect your identity. These days, it's common for us to have a lot of sensitive information online. It can be work or study related, or even just personal content. In either case, passwords are the keys to your entire online life. But most people still reuse the same passwords across dozens of websites. One data breach and hackers have access to everything: your email, your bank account, and even your social media, which is why Proton Pass is great. It will warn you if your credentials show up in a data breach, allowing you to act as fast and efficiently as possible. No ads, no tracking, just Swiss privacy and open source security you can trust. And right now, Proton Pass is the best offers of the year, available for a limited time only. Check the link below in the video description to try Proton Pass and lock down your online life, keeping yourself safe and secure from all the risks out there. And now back to the video. So right off the bat, this gives one huge benefit that I want to touch on right away. This cleans up the dock and it makes it a one-page only dock, which is huge. A lot of new players were struggling with the 2-dock setup. Let's be honest, it was super clunky. You had to click the arrow to go from one area to the next. I hated how the dock was before, so this is a massive upgrade. Now you only have one page on the dock, everything's super clear, and a lot of the upgrades were moved to the university to give space and make this possible. This is a huge benefit and a net positive. That's like probably the only net positive there is. I don't think think anyone's really debating that this is a bad thing. Does anybody miss the 2-page doc? I don't think anyone does. So that's a huge positive with very little downside. It's easy to get it out of the way. As for the rest of the stuff, I just want to say first off, before we go into the in-depth breakdown, it's not bad at all. It's really not bad. I think it's a step in the right direction. It feels like some things about it are good. Some things, hit the nail on the head. Some things were really nice. And then other things missed the mark. And I think overall, if I had to give you guys an overall statement, I think the rework kind of missed the mark for a few reasons. So number one, I don't think it made water play that much more strategic, which is kind of like what it set out to do. And number two, I don't think it made water play much more fun. So from a competitive aspect and a, social and fun aspect, I don't think it really accomplished what it set out to accomplish, which is to enhance the gameplay. It's not that much more strategic than it was before, and it's not that much more fun than it was before. If anything, it has some pros and some cons in both spheres. It's kind of interesting that this is the case because, in my opinion, the old water play was not very enjoyable at all. It was probably the worst part about Age of Empires 2, and it was not popular on the rank ladder, not very popular in tournaments. A lot of the players didn't like it, a lot of the viewers didn't like it, and probably, like my personal opinion now, the least fun part about Age of Empires before was just having a map where only galleys are viable and you have to micro only galleys back and forth, or those situations where it's the fire demo fights and you're kind of just like cheesing the other guy with demo, going back to repair. We've seen it 1,000 times and it's just not very enjoyable. All right, I think that's my opinion, but I think that's an opinion that's shared by many. So that's what I thought the rework would address. I thought the rework would make the water gameplay more fun, number one, more enjoyable to play, and I also expected it to make it more strategically interesting. All right, so let's take a look at what the water rework did in theory, and then I'll kind of tell you guys what I felt in practice is actually the case. And again, it's not necessarily good or bad. This is kind of just how I've been feeling about it through my first 10 to 20 hours of testing, both in tournaments and in preparation. All right, so point number one, in theory, a new ship line has been added. All right, the Hulk has been introduced to the game, which is a counter to the fire ship. The fire ship counters the galley, and the galley counters the Hulk. A new rock, paper, scissors system, but this time we have the demos on the side. So technically we have an extra unit, which should add strategic depth. So this is a very clear idea that the devs wanted to push for. They wanted to have more options, more strategy that you can go for, and they wanted to have a ship, the Hulk, that is upgraded through melee upgrades. And so you have something extra to consider, which civs can get melee upgrades for free, which civs get bonuses in that department, etc. This all makes sense. This seems like it would be a big hit and it would create, a little bit more strategy on water as far as like which units you can choose. Because back in the day, or not back in the day, like 3 weeks ago, a month ago, on the old water, you had basically two options. Either you go full galleys on the big waters, or you go fire ship demo play on the small pond like lakes or whatnot. So you had two options and nothing in between. However, the theory of adding a new ship line doesn't really work in practice. In practice, it's the same as before. Certain situations usually call for one specific unit or one specific strategy, and doing anything else usually does not feel very good. So I expected going into it that you'd be like mixing and matching, going some of this unit, then some of that unit. But after a few games, I quickly realized, no, in this situation, I still want pure galleys. And in the other situation, I pretty much only want Hulks. Fire ships used to be like, good in small lakes, but now if you go fire ships in a small lake, the other guy goes Hulks, and Hulks are beating the fire ships in the small lake. And you might be thinking, okay, just mix in galleys. Well, Hulks beat galleys in small lakes as well, and that's where the problem arises. The Hulk is basically replacing the fire ship of old as the unit that dominates the ponds or dominates, the hybrid maps, and it doesn't really have a good counter. And the best part is the Hulk doesn't really have another element to it. It's not like you have Hulks and demos. Like before we had fire ships and demos. Now the demos are very hard to make work because they need their own specific upgrade, which we'll talk about later. And so going for demos mixed in with, Hulks is not really viable. You could mix in a couple if you want, but the Hulks are quite tanky and the Hulks usually just dominate the ponds. So we're back in the same situation where galleys are dominating the long waters and Hulks are dominating the ponds. It's a little bit better, I will say. I feel like the fire ships got a pretty big buff. They now take less damage from galleys. So fire ships seem a little bit better against galleys in the big waters. So it gives you a little bit of a better option to maybe tech switch into some fires. But realistically, like getting a bunch of war galleys and like 2-3 Hulks in front will shut down any kind of fire ship play. So in the end, it's still the same situation where galleys are dominating big water and small ponds are now just being dominated by Hulk instead of fires and demos. Is it better? Maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less. I don't have strong feelings in either way, but I feel like nothing has really changed. All right, and that's going to be a reoccurring theme throughout this video. Things look different, but in reality, they're just actually the same with new skins. The next point I want to talk about in theory is that demos needing their own tech is a nerf to them, which was needed. So in theory, demos were really strong before, especially in Castle Age and onwards. They just got too much value. You upgraded them by default, so fire ships were just getting hard counted by demos, and there was really no reason to not mix in demos when you had fire ships on the field. So demos got way too much value beforehand and in the current game. So in practice, this kind of works. So demos are not really viable. You need your own upgrade, which makes it slow, makes it expensive. The unit itself isn't cheap. It costs 80 gold and some wood per demo, so it's quite an expensive unit. And so in practice, this nerf did what it set out to do. So demos are a lot harder to use, and you have to rely on the other ships for the most part, and demos are now more situational. So in practice, the theory actually worked well. We took kind of demos out of the game a little bit. They're pushed to the side. Fair enough. What does this actually mean though? For the gameplay, this means that with no demos, it's extremely snowbally. If you get a small numbers lead, 1-2 units extra over your opponent in Castle Age, for example, you're always going to have those 1-2 units extra in every fight to come, because we don't have the demo factor that can get extra value, one ship trading for 4 ships. We have just ships trading against each other, and whoever has more is usually going to continue taking better and better fights. So now what we're seeing, because demos are not a thing anymore, or not really viable at least, people are just stack patrolling their fire ships, hulks, and galleys, sending them in, and whoever has bigger numbers will win the fight, continue to gain advantage, and it's extremely hard to take a better fight or to take a winning fight from a losing position. You actually have very little comeback mechanic because demos are just very hard to make work, and so you're just in a situation where whoever starts winning the first few engagements will basically guaranteed win the game, or at least win the water, and that usually has a pretty big impact on the game. A little side note here on the topic of snowballing, water units are all now incredibly fast because they added upgrades at the university that boost the speed of water units. So it's very hard to react and to navigate fights. It's just really fast units being thrown at each other, and it's really hard as a player to like get the upper hand over your opponent. If you have more, you win. If you have less, you lose. So what's happening now is that players are just patrolling in, and they're just praying. For the most part, that's how you take a fight on water right now. I'm not saying that the old version was better of just throwing demos at each other, but I do feel like the old demos were kind of keeping the units in check, preventing snowballs from happening too quickly, preventing fire ships from just patrolling without any concern in the world. Demos added that kind of strategic fear, that respect that you always have to, consider a demo could be coming up. Now demos, very hard to use, not that effective. And so units like the Hulk, especially the fire ship, just being thrown in there, and whoever has more is usually continuing to gain advantage. And so the snowballiness of the game is incredible. It's nothing I've ever played before has been, at least Age of Empires 2 related, has been as snowbally as this water rework is. Moving on to the third point, this is the more text in university. In theory, more text in university adds a strategic element, gives you extra decision-making potential. You can now decide to pick up certain texts, or you can, skip it and do something else. So in theory, this adds more decision-making and adds more strategy to the game. In practice, this actually makes the game less strategically diverse, which sounds crazy, but here is how my games have been going at the very least. Because the techs are so good in the university, and there's so many of them in one place, you have to always go university first. So now on water maps in prior, you'd go university if you wanted ballistics. Nothing else in the university affects water. So if you weren't playing galleys, you would skip the university, all right? And you'd go for like a town center, or you'd go for like a siege workshop play, or you'd switch to some kind of land play if it's a hybrid map. Or if you were playing galleys, you can decide to get ballistics. It's a big investment, or just skip it and try to play defensive, gain some economy. So whether you were going galleys or not, you can decide if you want to go ballistics or if you want to go for other options. Now there's like 10 techs in university. Okay, more realistically, there's like 4 to 5 at any given moment, but that's still a little bit too much. You have so many techs that all affect water play on top of having the ballistics there. So on water maps, it's a no-brainer. Like I'd be very surprised if in less than like 95% of games will be university first. And I'd be very surprised if that isn't the case. In all of my games, I'm rushing the castle, slamming a university, selling my stone probably, because who's adding town centers? You have to just snowball the game. You have to win water. So we'll slap down a university, pick up any tech that is like relevant to the units I'm making, and then hoping that I'm able to win fights because I'm getting these techs in. And these techs are too many in number and way too good. Like ships moving faster is just like so good. You're affecting all your ships. Ships getting +1 pierce armor, really good for galleys. The siphon stack, really good for fire ships, dealing with, any other unit. So instead of having having a situation where, oh, you want to decide if you want a university or not. No, now we're just always going university. The only decision is which tech to get, which is okay. Like there's some decision making there for sure, but just like the fact that you're forced into the university, in my opinion, that kind of makes it a little bit less strategically interesting. And the fourth and last point is that in theory, because we have an extra mainline ship, the Hulk, we now have more possible unit compositions in late game. So especially with unique unit ships like the Caravel, the Longboat, the Turtle Ship, whatever the Dravidian one is called, you have more combos. You can mix and match. You can go for this unit plus this unit. You have more options in late game. Heavy Demo now makes kind of a comeback because in late game you have more resources available. Not really worried about tempo. So in theory, in late game, you have more options and more combos that you can go for. However, in practice, I've found that unfortunately, this doesn't really do as intended yet again. In practice, you just go for whichever imp unit is best upgraded for your civ. Like for example, if your civ has fast fires and no Carax, so the elite Hulk basically, then you just go for the fast fires in most situations. You're not going to go for the Castle Age Hulk when you have access to fast fires. In like very little situations will the Castle Age version of a ship be able to compete with Imperial Age versions of other ships, even if you're supposed to counter them. So for example, the Castle Age Hulk is not going to stand up to fast fire ships if they have a few galleons behind. There's just no chance for that to be the case. So there's a lot of these unit combos that sound so cool on paper, but when you actually play the game, you realize that your options are really limited to what your civ has available in the tech tree. Only when you have all the techs available can you really mix and match, and it becomes extremely interesting in late game, which unfortunately is very few civilizations. So the pattern for me is super clear. Microsoft wanted to introduce a rework for the water to add more strategic options, make it simpler for new players to understand, you know, what's what and what's where, and allow pro players to mix and match different units and kind of create more options, simulating the options we have on land. Unfortunately, what ends up happening in the actual games is we just going for the options that make the most sense in the moment, and a lot of the mixing and matching is not really viable. It really is just make more of what's good right now and try to overwhelm your opponent, try to completely snowball the game, and whoever starts winning the early fights builds up such a big advantage that your opponent usually can't come back from. So in conclusion, basically what I've been saying is the same for every point. What Microsoft intended to do with this water rework sounded really good on paper and sounded like they're on to the right things and they have the right idea in mind. But when I actually play the water rework, I don't feel like these ideas are shown in the gameplay. I feel like we're back to square one, where a lot of the prior issues with water are still here. The rework just makes things look different, but they feel the same. And that's an unfortunate thing to have with the water rework. I was actually really excited for it. At first, I was a bit worried about like the fishing ships garrisoning. Then I realized it's not that big of a deal. And now I'm realizing that after playing it a bunch, it doesn't feel like it really did a lot for me personally. So those are my current thoughts about the water rework. I think if you ask me, remove the Hulk, buff the fire ship like you guys did, nerf the galley and nerf the demo like you guys did, and just keep the same trio of units, but with a better balance to where fire ships can actually counter galleys a bit better, and galleys are not that good at sniping fishing ships, and maybe keep the fishing ships garrisoning in docks. Maybe that part's fine. I feel like certain elements I loved and other elements like the Hulk in general just really didn't do it for me. I'm not a huge fan of it. The gameplay is not very exciting or interesting, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. Microsoft did too much too suddenly, and we're left with some good, but the good is kind of overshadowed by a lot of weird stuff and a lot of boring / bad stuff, to put it as simply as possible. So overall, I think that water could use a rework for sure, but I don't think that this rework as is right now addresses the correct issues that water has. I think a little bit more thought needs to be put into it. Maybe some changes need to be made, and maybe they will be. Remember, this is not in live servers. This is just on a balance patch that we're playing for a tournament. I have no idea what Microsoft's plans are with this, whether they're going to release it right after the tournament or whether they're going to make adjustments. I have no clue. So we'll see what they come up with, but here are my thoughts as is right now, and I want to leave it open for a discussion to you guys. Have you guys tried it out on the beta? Have you guys been watching some of the tournaments and have your own opinions? What do you guys think about this water rework? And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys did enjoy the video. Hopefully this answers your questions about the water rework, and yeah, hopefully I added some perspective to the whole thing. So take care, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.